Renunciation heralds meditation.
Yes.
The mental state of renunciation is an essential prerequisite for practicing concentration and meditation. You need to first free yourself from your mental bondage to the world. The mind is riddled with desires. The unfulfilled desires cause the mind to be agitated, disturbed. Such a mind remains enmeshed in the affairs of the world. It cannot rise to the subtler realm of contemplation and meditation. You need a calm and composed mind to do that. And the way to achieve that state is through reduction of desires. The three yogas, karma, action, bhakti, devotion, and jnana, knowledge, have been prescribed from time immemorial to eradicate desires. Karma yoga, the path of action, is the spiritual discipline directed to the body. Bhakti yoga, the path of devotion, to the mind. And jnana yoga, the path of knowledge, to the intellect. Thus must you intelligently proportion these disciplines to suit the constitution of your personality. You then gradually reduce the bulk of desires. Your mind is freed from agitation. It becomes calm. A calm mind alone can be directed to meditation, and through meditation you attain the spiritual enlightenment. The above traditional procedure has been scientifically designed. You cannot substitute this procedure and plunge into meditation. The mind requires to be prepared by the practice of the yogas to free it from the bulk of desires. A practice that involves time, a procedure that may be slow but sure. But people lack the patience and perseverance. They look for immediate results. This human weakness has been widely exploited. Self-appointed spiritual leaders have been hawking physical exercise as yoga and selling meditation indiscriminately to unprepared minds all over the world. The innocent masses have been led astray. Scores of pseudo spiritual courses are marketed everywhere. Some of these courses enjoy a large following because they lend an immediate peace, solace. The ignorant do not realize that their experience is temporary, transitory, and that they fall back into their state of sorrow and misery. These courses do not help you to grow spiritually. The divine self is lost in spiritual ignorance. The mass of desires wields the self. You cannot recognize yourself through this mass, just as you cannot see your reflection in a pond filled with moss. The green mantle covers it completely. There are two ways of seeing your reflection in the pond. The simple, easy way is to plunge your fingers into the water and push the moss aside. The mass separates forthwith to give you a glimpse of the reflection in the clear water beneath. But before you can register the sight of the reflection below, the mass reunites. It reassumes its mantle, masking the reflection. This way of recognizing yourself is futile. The popular spiritual course adopted by the masses is akin to pushing the mass to get a glimpse of reflection. These practices lead you nowhere. The effective way of seeing your reflection is by removing the mask gradually. The mask is cleared little by little. It becomes thinner and thinner. Ironically, you gain no glimpse of the reflection yet, but with sustained effort, the mask is rendered so thin that it separates for good. You see your reflection in the clear water below. Similarly, you need to clear the mass of desires in the lake of your mind. This is achieved through study and reflection of spiritual literature. As you gain more knowledge, the mantle of ignorance becomes thinner, the mass of desires reduces. Thus, by your determined, sustained effort, the veil of ignorance splits to let you realize the divine self within.
Anshu is asking a clarification on the parable. The parable that was in the previous topic. The two childhood friends happened to meet after a long time. One a successful business person, another a sannyasi, that parable. So the question that she's asking is it the possession or dispossession that really saved us? Is it possession of the wealth or dispossession of the wealth that really saved us is what the sannyasi is saying. So now Anshu is asking, explain the parable. She's saying, in this example, yes, it is the dispossession that saved them. But was the possession not important? Please explain the parable. In this example, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay. In this example, in this parable, what the sannyasi is saying is,
Yes.
unless you let go of your cherished possession, which is the wealth, unless you let go of the wealth, you would not have gotten saved. So, when you ask, is not was the possession not important? Yes, the possession is important, but that which saved the life is the dispossession. Supposing if he had refused to bargain and negotiating, an example,
Yes.
another example, another parable I'll give you to make it more complicated and not to give you clarity, just to make it more confusing for you. In those days, about 150 years, 100 years back, 150 years back, there is no water in the trains, like the bus. Now they give bottled water. No, previously, even 5 years back, where there was no bottled water so much available, there is no water in the train. So every station, the guy will come and sell water. So in the hot summer afternoon, the train stopped at a station and the boy is selling water. 15 paise for a glass of water. 15 paise for a glass of water. One person stopped the boy and said, "Why are you charging much? Can't you give it for 10 paisa?" The boy said, "You are not thirsty," and he moved on to the next person. Are you able to follow? He said, "You are not thirsty." If you are thirsty, you wouldn't be
Bargaining.
bargaining. So same way, if this fellow were to bargain with that boatman, trying to possess the wealth that he has acquired the wealth. When you say was the acquisition of wealth not important, you have to change the word, that's all. In your question, you have to ask, it is the dispossession that saved them, but was the acquisition not important? If you change the word from possession to acquisition, you will get the answer by yourself. Are you able to follow?
Yes.
They say
Yes.
acquisition is not wrong. Acquisition was never said, do not acquire. On what you have acquired, do not develop the spirit of possessiveness. You cannot avoid acquisition, but you can avoid developing possessiveness towards the acquisition. Now, if you have developed possessiveness towards the acquisition, what will happen? You will not be able to let go of it. To an extent where you will hide and you will die. Nobody will know where. Nobody will know where it is. Nobody will know what it is. One of the philosophers wrote his will in Latin language. And they asked, "Why did you write in? I don't want anybody to know how much." Because nobody knew how to read Latin. He wrote his will in Latin language. History, this is not my imaginary story. This is history. And they asked him, "Why did you do that?" He said, "I don't want people to know how much I have." This is called possessiveness, and this person acquires, and that acquisition will be of no use to him or to anybody else. Therefore, Vedanta says acquiring or acquisition is not the problem, is not the taboo. Developing the possessiveness over the acquisition is the problem. Are you able to follow?
Yes.
If you just change the word, was the acquisition not important? If you use the word acquisition in the question instead of possession, you will get the
Answer.
You will get the answer. So acquisition is all right. Possessiveness is destructive. Acquisition is all right, but possessiveness is destructive. You cannot live without acquisition. Life is driven by these two motivations, acquisition and enjoyment. Kanchana and Kamini, Bhajagovindam. Life is driven by these two motivations, acquisition and enjoyment. You cannot avoid acquisition. As long as you are alive, acquisition will be happening. What you can do is, or what you should do is not develop a possessiveness. So the wealthy person acquiring is not the problem here. He was able to let go of it. So the sannyasi here is trying to explain, is it hoarding that saved them or letting go saved them? What saved them? Letting go saved them. Letting go means, under normally if a trip is costing 100 rupees, that fellow would have said 1,000 rupees. He let go of it, that saved him. So the concept here is, it's not the problem of acquiring that didn't save you. What saved you is letting go of it. You are able to follow?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is it okay, ma? Did I answer you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Now, renunciation heralds meditation, the topic. And the mind that is riddled with desires, the mind that is desire ridden, the mind that is affected by desires cannot practice any higher discipline. And meditation is the highest discipline. To practice meditation, you need a calm, composed mind. Shantanam, he says. In the Atma Bodha, he says, equanimity, the calmness of the mind is a prerequisite. What makes the mind agitated? That which makes the mind agitated is the desires. Whatsoever it seems to be the external reason for agitations, the only true reason for mental agitation is desires. And it is given an adjective called unfulfilled desires, because desire itself means unfulfillment. There is no such thing called fulfilled desires. Desire itself means unfulfilled. That unfulfilled desires, what it does, it keeps the mind in a state of the desire. You can call it desire or you can call it unfulfilled desire. Whatever be it, it keeps the mind in a state of suspense, in a state of tension, in a state of anxiety, in a state of worry. The mind that is in a state of worry and anxiety and tensed is not disciplined, ready to practice meditation. The mistake that people make, he says, is when you are agitated, do meditation to find the peace of mind. Vedanta says, unless you are peaceful, you cannot meditate. It's not that meditation is going to give you mental peace. Unless you are peaceful mentally, you will not be able to meditate. And how do you derive that mental peace? The spiritual practices of Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. Karma Yoga is action. Bhakti Yoga is the attitude behind the action. Jnana Yoga is the direction of action. When all these are attended to, when you attend to the karma, when you attend to the bhakti, and when you attend to the Jnana Yoga, the disciplines dedicated to action, emotion, and knowledge brings a state of maturity. That state of maturity is called renunciation. Renunciation is nothing but a matured state. A mature human being. Who is a sannyasi? A sannyasi is a matured human being. And the maturity arising out of these three spiritual practices. He is able to do these practices itself because of what? He is able to do these practices itself. What brings about the practice? What drives a person to do spiritual practice? What drives a person to seek something different from the world? A basic understanding that what you are seeking and what the world is offering is not matching. They are not in sync. You are seeking something, the world is offering something diametrically opposite to what you are seeking. You and the world do not sync. And then the question is there anything higher? That person gets into the spiritual practices. Does karma bhakti jnana yoga reaches the state of renunciation? And a person of renunciation would be able to practice meditation. A calm mind alone can be directed to meditation, attain spiritual enlightenment. This is the sequence. And then he goes on to discuss the wrong approach or the wrong understanding that people have about meditation. We are not going into the, I'm not going into the wrong practices details because simultaneously we are doing the Bhagavad Gita chapter 6 Dhyana Yoga, yoga of meditation. And there, just to give you the summary of what we discussed in the intro to meditation, if you can recollect the introduction that was given to that chapter, it would be easy to follow what is being said in this topic. A immediate peace comes when you are in meditation. There is an instant immediate result. What is the instant immediate result? The instant immediate result is a temporary state of thoughtlessness. And that temporary state of thoughtlessness is very refreshing, rejuvenating. Remember the difference. Suspending the thought temporarily versus making sure the thoughts do not arise at all. Again, I repeat, temporarily suspending the thoughts versus making sure that the thoughts do not arise at all. Renunciation is the practice where through knowledge and understanding and all that, we have come to the point of where the thoughts do not arise at all. In the way that people are practicing meditation, they practice meditation as in a temporary state of suspending the thoughts temporarily. And what is temporarily suspending thoughts means? Exactly like what happens in the deep sleep state. In the deep sleep state, the thoughts are not eradicated, but they are temporarily in a state of hibernation. They are temporarily suspended. They are brought into a temporary stillness. That temporary stillness cannot be held on for a long period of time. That's why it's called temporary. Temporary itself means it can't be held on for a long period of time. But the innocent masses seeking this instant, immediate peace and solace get carried away by these practices, for which he is saying it is not going to help you in evolution. One. Second, meditation is not for mental peace. The purpose of meditation, you ask anybody who's meditating, the purpose of mental peace is, the purpose of meditation is mental peace. Why do you want to meditate? I want a peace of mind. I want to be peaceful. Meditation, the purpose of meditation is not to find a peaceful mind. Mind finds its peace in very many ways. There are various ways in which the mind finds peace. And all these ways in which the mind finds peace is temporary. All the way in which the mind finds peace is temporary. Have you ever observed the way in which you find peace, the way in which the human being finds peace or happiness is nothing but by an act of self-forgetting? Anything that makes you to forget yourself, you will call it as all sources of peace, or whatever the source of peace for a human being is, it has to be self-forgetting. If you understand that, if you understand this concept, down the line you will understand how meditation doesn't work. A person goes to watch a movie for what? 3 hours, I want to forget everything, sir. A person goes and the person has a drink for what? I want to forget. A person goes to a temple for what? A person can come to Vedanta class for what? 1 hour of break from 1 hour of break from everything, sir. It could be just finding a temporary state. Meditation also provides the same temporary benefit. Are you able to follow? Why we call it as temporary? Because the 3rd day, the 5th day, it becomes painful. The first day you land in the Vedanta Academy, you will feel, oh my God, there is nothing. This is the place on this planet. 3rd day, 5th day, what happens? Something starts. 10th day, 15th day, the mind wants to. What is that between the 1st day and the 15th day? Place is the same. Are you able to follow? The place is the same, the food is the same, everything remains the same. But what was the difference between the 1st day and the 15th day? Exactly like you eat in a restaurant. The first meal that you eat there is very nice. Second meal continuously, yeah? You have breakfast there, it's fantastic. Lunch also in the same place. How do you feel? Dinner also in the same place. 3rd day, you feel like you want to starve but don't want to go on. It's there. Now, what is the difference between the 1st meal and the 5th meal? The quality is the same, but what happened? The peace or happiness that the mind experienced is of temporary in nature. Similarly, in exactly the same thing happens in meditation too. The first class, the first session, when somebody tells you a few things to follow, and you also follow, everything seems to have quietened down. And 2nd day, 3rd day, you will come out. You think that you are going to come out. enlightened. In Pune, one of the days, going by auto to some place. So going in the uniform, anybody sees in the dress, the dhoti, kurta, mala and all of this, normally they will want to pick up a conversation. And some conversation he picked up and my knowledge of Hindi is absolutely zero. I have no knowledge of Hindi. And what he asked and what I answered, God only knows, but we were having a conversation. And then he asked, where ashram, what? I said, Malavali Vedanta Academy. I said, how long you stay there? It's a 3-year course, and I'm continuing my stay there. Something I was telling him. He said, 3 years for what? Question that he asked is, 3 years for what? I said, 3 years for moksha. Now if anybody asks, I will not say moksha and all. Oh, young, no. So I said, 3 years for moksha, to gain moksha, 3 years. 3 years, come, I'll take you to one lady here. In 3 days, she will give you moksha. And I was also so tempted to go because Swamiji will grant me 3 days leave. I know. I go and tell him, he will say, go. 3 days leave. I thought I'll take a 3-day leave and go. And I said, what she will do? Maximum 3 days. If you are lucky, it will happen in the first day itself. What is it? Hundreds of people will be sitting in rows. And the lady will come. She is the guru there. She will come. And she will come with, it's a broomstick, but made of peacock feathers, not with sticks, not with the coconut leaves, not that broomstick. A broomstick kind of thing made of peacock feathers. And as she passes, she will randomly touch a few people's head. Anybody's head she touches, that person is certified to be realized. And this is the climax. That auto fellow told me that I am self-realized. You may not believe you may not believe, I genuinely thought I should prostrate to that man. With what conviction he said I am? With what conviction that man said I am self-realized? This is what happens. It has got no connection to vairagya, no connection to detachment, and the autometer is fake. That fellow is a fake. I know the place. He's taking me in a different route. I also thought it's okay. Another 10 rupees, big deal. Let him take that 10 rupees. What is that? And then that man is saying, I'm self-realized. That's what he says. They have been led astray. They are marketed everywhere, a large following. All this happens, but no spiritual evolution happens. So meditation is not for spiritual evolution. Meditation is the last human activity. Technically, the last human activity is meditation. After meditation realization, all activities comes to an end. All activities comes to an end. For meditation leads to self-realization. Meditation heralds self-realization. Are you able to follow? So there is no further activity after meditation. Without removing the ignorance, people try and get into this meditation and wanting to know it quickly. 2 examples to explain how it doesn't work. One example that is given here is the moss. Second example is given in Kenopanishad. In part 4 Kenopanishad, like the lightning, he says. Meditation and all, without preparation and all that, getting into spiritual practice, getting into meditation is like lightning. What is lightning? It is so brilliant, no? The lightning is so brilliant that it lights up the entire landscape. For a split second, the entire landscape is well lit, and even before you know what it is, what happens? Anybody? What happens? Type simply type, doesn't matter. Anyway, whatever answer you give, I'm not going to agree. No. So any answer you give, I'm going to say it is wrong only. So what difference? What happens? Blinding darkness. It becomes so blinding darkness. Second example is the moss. The lake is covered with the moss and you are not able to see your reflection. One way is to plunge your hand and see the reflection, and even before you can recognize your reflection, the layers cover up. Another way is what? Remove the moss bit by bit by bit. When you remove the moss bit by bit by bit, a time comes where the layer of moss is so thin that it separates by itself, and when it separates by itself, you see a reflection permanently. That permanent state is called the state of self-realization. Renunciation heralds meditation. With this, we conclude chapter 13, renunciation. Now we move on to chapter 14, meditation. We will be talking about the technique of meditation, and then we'll be talking about the principle of meditation. What is the mantra that you will be using, the Om, and then the procedural details. Then comes self-realization. So again, the flow of thought in this chapter is the technique of meditation, the principle of meditation, the Om, the procedural details, then self-realization. To summarize what is discussed as in meditation, number one, meditation is not for peace of mind. Number two, meditation, some people talk about meditation for peace of mind. Some people talk about meditation as a therapy, as a health, as a if you have blood pressure, blood sugar, do meditation. So meditation is not a therapy. Meditation is not for peace of mind. Some people talk about meditation as in spiritual powers and all that. Again, meditation has got nothing to do with any of that. So what meditation is not for, first understand that. And then we'll understand what is meditation for. What meditation is not for. One set of people in the name of yoga, the yogis talk about mysticism, a mystical powers. Technically, it's called Siddhi powers. One set of people do meditation too. For that, all that you can do in meditation is you can train yourself to temporarily suspend your thoughts. It can be done by practice. And Vedantic meditation is not suspension of thoughts. Vedantic meditation is witnessing the thought. When you start witnessing, that which you are witnessing is seen correctly. And when it is seen rightly, mind no more runs behind it. So in Vedanta, we don't try to go to the state of thoughtlessness and all. For there is no experience of thoughtlessness that is possible. You can come and bring the mind to a stage of a single thought, and that's it. After that, you just have to leave it to the divine. The jump from finite to infinite. The jump from finite to infinite is not a product of human effort, but the human effort can come to the point of single thought. To come to that point of single thought, the most potent, useful mantra is Om. When we go there, we'll see Om in detail. Pranava, it's called. Now, what meditation is not for? People talk about meditation for peace of mind, elevated state of consciousness, a high. People use very many words. All that doesn't mean, all means what? S.R.L. Shankar. Who is S.R.L. Shankar? Who is reading the book now? Yeah, he is the man S.R.L. Shankar. And in the last 10 years, he would have asked me 150 times. Even last week he asked me. Out of the 150 times he asked, 140 times I pretend I am deaf. 10 times I smile, but I don't answer. He asks, sir, after the class, why can't we meditate for? Why can't we meditate? I said, class le thungin irukkranga ellarum. Everybody is sleeping in the class only. What will happen after that? Yeah. We have to give some loudspeaker. I have to keep to wake up. I said, my class itself is meditative. No, I said. Yeah. My class itself is so meditative. There is no need to do meditation. No, sir, don't joke. You bring us to that height and, we are so inspired and all that. Shankar, correct? Huh? I'm not exaggerating. No. See, I'm not, he told me. It is not done at all. Why? Because it's a kind of, yeah. I will give the English word. I do not know the equivalent English word. The actual Tamil word for that is Shankar. Meditation la or bodha. It's an addiction. It gives you a, when you take ganja, when you take any of this substance, you go through a high. Meditation also gives you a kind of high. And here we are trying to understand the futility of all these 1.5 hours. We talk about the futility of all these highs, and then at the end of the class, sit and get that high. All that is done is undone. All that is done gets undone. It's a kind of intoxication. It gives you that, it makes you feel as though you are seeing something it makes you feel as though you have reached somewhere. Nothing. You have not reached anywhere. The mind has, as it is, the mind is hallucinating a lot. Now one more hallucination. What? That's why I gave the example of the Pune auto driver. You know, the way in which I don't think even Ramatirtha would have said with that conviction, I am self-realized. Even Shankaracharya wouldn't have said with that conviction, the way that man told me, I am self-realized. Even though I know he is blabbering, the fact that he said I am self-realized, I felt like falling at his feet. You follow? Meditation is not for all this. You don't experience anything. Because people who want spiritual experience, they want to meditate. And there is no such thing called spiritual experience. Correct? Huh? There is no such thing called spiritual experience. People who wants to experience something, they will get into meditation. And then there are so many techniques. They say meditation will keep you in the present. We also say mind goes to the past, mind goes to the future. Be in the present. Meditation keeps you in the present. Meditation doesn't keep you in the present. Meditation takes you to a state of deep sleep, and in the deep sleep you feel as though you are in the present. Mind is running helter-skelter. When you are in the present, you are all right. Now, what is in the present means? If you live in the present moment after moment after moment and all, yeah, very soon you will become like me only. Yeah, you will pull out everything. Headache only you will get. What is being in the present? Being in the present is nothing but living for a higher ideal. That's what living in the present means. What is living in the present? Meditation keeps you in the present. There's no such thing called consciously living in the present. By understanding the futility of the past and the future, the mind will not move into the past and the future. By understanding the uselessness of this movement of past and future, mind by itself don't go. That matured state is sannyasi. And that sannyasi, that renunciation can practice meditation. Are you able to follow? So, meditation is not for gaining any spiritual. Meditation is not for gaining any spiritual experience, as it were. For there is no such thing called spiritual experience. I just experienced it, sir. And tears were flowing uncontrollably. You watch a movie, tears will flow. Yeah. If somebody close to you has passed away, tears will flow. Is that a thing? Meditation dissolves the experiencer. Technically, remember this. Now, I am explaining technically. Meditation is the practice by which the experiencer is dissolved completely. When the experiencer is dissolved, what is there to experience? Are you able to follow? The experiencer is dissolved in meditation. Ushanne Karsheyama Surya, Isavasya Upanishad, talks about the drama of realization. Even before the person knows what has happened, it's gone. Again, verses 52, 53, chapter 3, sorry, chapter 2, before Sthitaprajna portion, talks about the drama of realization. In all these explanations, you find the experiencer is dissolved. It is not stopping the thought. It is not temporarily suspending the thought. It is making sure that the root of the thought itself is burnt away. The root of the thought must be burnt away in meditation. It is not that the thoughts are running, I temporarily suppress it. And human being, by the sheer willpower, you can suppress it for a short while. That is the strength of the willpower. By continuously practicing this, by continuously exercising this willpower, you can temporarily suspend the thought. That's where they go for all this dramatics, no? They go into the alpha state, beta state, I don't know. In a normal state, we have to be in normal state only. We need not go for alpha state and beta state. Normal state. They go and all gadgets are kept all over the body. And wow, sir. Yeah. Quite a few people from our group only tells me, they say, sir, it's all, and they keep the machines. And I said, don't keep all this in me. If you keep all this in me, my blood pressure will show up, I'll say. What else do you say? Because next they will ask, sir, can you sit and can you also go through that procedure and show how your thoughts are stilled? I say, if you put those machines on me, my fluctuating blood pressure only will show up. Are you able to follow? This is a temporary suspension of thoughts, which can be achieved by sheer willpower, which has got nothing to do with meditation. You follow? It has got nothing to do with meditation. Therefore, what meditation is not for a spiritual experience. Meditation is not for a peace of mind. Meditation is not for reducing your blood pressure, blood sugar. Out of 100 people who take to meditation, 96% don't take it seriously. And thank God they don't take it seriously. Some good karma they have done. Divinity is protecting them from not taking it seriously. That 3-4% take it seriously, and they end up in all kinds of mental trouble, mental issues. Most of these meditation classes, they will take an undertaking. You know what that undertaking is? If something happens to you, we are not responsible. Supposing, Srikanth, before you come to the class, I'll give you a letter, sign that letter. Whatever happens out of Vedanta class, you will not hold me responsible. Now, what does it mean? Something is going to happen? No. Something is going to happen? No. Why take that? Why even ask you to give a letter that if anything happens? Because it does happen. Number Chennai, I have the last count is 16. 16 people I have sent for medication, treatment. I said, go and meet this doctor. That fellow will give you a medication. 6-8 months, you will be all right. First thing is stop this stop this meditation. 96% don't go through any of this because they don't take it. They don't take it seriously. Don't do that in Vedanta class. Huh? Take Vedanta seriously. Correct, sir. We also follow the same formula here also. We don't take whatever you say, we don't take it seriously. That's why we are also saved. Huh? Here you take it seriously because here we talk about the karma, the right knowledge, the right attitude, the change of, it's not stilling the thought, it is not silencing the mind temporarily, it is not quietening the mind. Meditation is not at all required because nature has given us the method to quieten the mind. There is a natural method by which the mind gets quietened. By the wrong way of living, we are not allowing that to happen. What is the natural method? What is the way in which the nature's blessing? What is the way the nature has blessed that our minds go into a temporary state of quietude? What is the nature's blessings? Vijay? Huh? See, we have muted all of you, so you can't speak. Even if you speak, I will not hear. Thank God Ganesh is unmuting me. Otherwise, he's unmuting me itself is a big thing. And he will not unmute any one of you. So you have to type only. The nature's blessing to...
The
nature's blessing, every day we go through this period of quietude, nature's blessing. We don't need to do meditation and all to get to that state. What is that natural state? R.D. Prasad, correct. R.D. Prasad, very correct. Deep sleep. What more you need for peace of mind other than deep sleep? But the way in which we live life in the waking state is so traumatic that we are not getting the natural blessings is gone. Pills after pills you take also, the person doesn't fall off to sleep, and then meditation will make a person fall off to sleep. All that we need to do is just follow the natural pattern. What is the natural pattern of life? If I follow a disciplined, sacrificial way of living, I need not do meditation for mental peace. For there is a natural state, and that natural state is deep sleep. That's why in Vedanta, we will talk about Shravana, Manana, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Nididhyasana and all that, but never do we highlight meditation. Even in that, as I said in the Gita introduction, even the 6th chapter called Dhyana Yoga, he's talking about meditation only in 3 verses. In fact, you should be talking the entire chapter on meditation. No, he doesn't talk. He just talks about 3 verses on meditation, that's all. Why? Because it is such an advanced practice. It would be taught by the guru to the student directly, and it need not be told. It need not be told generally. From another angle, if you look at it, historically, when did meditation become popular? Meditation was there in this country from beginning. Time immemorial meditation was there in this country. And when did meditation become popular? As a thumb rule you can keep. As a thumb rule you can keep. Anything America does, don't do it. You will be all right. Because they only meditation. Anything they do, if you do the opposite, you're all right. If they say do meditation, don't do meditation. And definitely they will not say study Vedanta and all, because too much. Because another word for Vedanta is renunciation, and renunciation is not an accepted Are you able to follow? Even though meditation was taught, practiced, done by many great masters. Even a person like Ramana Maharishi, he never told anybody meditate. He told people do inquiry. A person who are able to see the difference. Even a person like Ramana, now everybody is going and sitting there and doing meditation. I don't know what meditation people are doing there. God only knows. Even a person like him advocated vichara, inquiry. He said, do atma vicharam. Do self-inquiry, he said. He never said sit and meditate. For meditation was never in the mainstream of spiritual practices at all in this country. Why? Because we knew exactly what the role of meditation is and where it has to be placed. And when we are talking to the society, there is no need to talk to them about the advanced practices. You tell them what needs to be done. That's why whenever we talk about spiritual practices, we always say karma bhakti jnana yoga. Are you able to follow what I'm saying now? It was not a new thing that is discovered only 50, 60 years ago. Meditation was there in this country from time immemorial. And some of these books, one of the authoritative books. Now, don't ask me where that book is and don't start reading that book and all. You can start reading, nothing will change. That's a different story anyway. Parvati, the student, Shiva, the teacher. And Shiva gives Parvati the technique. About 110 techniques of meditation he gives. Shiva to Parvati. Husband and wife. Parvati is the wife, Shiva the husband. Parvati, the goddess, asks Shiva the question and Shiva gives. That book will never be taught in the mainstream of spiritual practices at all. We'll be only talking about Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga and Jnana Yoga. Yajna Karma would be spoken of, Bhakti Yoga would be spoken of, philosophy sessions and Gita and Upanishads will be spoken of, but never anything about meditation. Why? Because scientifically, historically, psychologically, I discussed it from the angle of psychology. I discussed it from the angle of philosophy. I'm saying it historically also. Meditation wasn't in the mainstream of spiritual practices at all. They will do Vishnu Sahasranama chanting, they will do. Rudra chanting, they will do. But they will never sit and meditate. For meditation, even if anybody tries this meditation and all that, the Guru will come and say, the Guru will give one whack and say, get up and do something. Get up and do something productively than sitting and wasting your time in meditation. So here, because we are studying this chapter meditation, we are getting a chance to see all the wrong approaches, the wrong understanding behind meditation, and then we are going to see what is the right and then we are going to see what is the right approach, the right knowledge behind meditation. With this, we conclude for today. And in the next session, we start with chapter 14, topic, Dhyanam, meditation. Is it okay? Even if any of these things is not understood, go by the culture, go by the history, go by the culture. This country is having a long historical, a long history of spiritual practices, a long history of great masters. And all of them spoke about Karma Yoga, Vairagya, Sannyasa. They never spoke about meditation. Even Patanjali Yoga Sutra, who is supposed to talk about all this, also doesn't talk about meditation a lot. He also talks about Yama Niyama. Even before you get into all this, he says practice. And if you can master Yama and Niyama, you have reached a very advanced stage. You have come to the level of sannyasa. So even the Ashtanga Yoga, even a person like Patanjali in the Yoga Sutra, he talks about the Yama and Niyama as the preparatory steps. And if you see what is Yama and what is Niyama, we know that what is being practiced today in the name of meditation is not, it's not said by Patanjali, it's not said by any enlightened master. Who says that God only knows, and who packaged it so well and sold it to the masses, God only knows, but people are following it. And every generation keeps changing the word, that's all. If they say meditation, now they will not use the word meditation. The new word is mindfulness. And I always say, every generation knows one thing to do. What? To find a new word. Technique remains the same. Vocabulary keeps changing, and in discovering the new word, they misunderstand that they have discovered something new. Now the thing is mindfulness. So quite a few people ask me, sir, what is mindfulness? I said Vedanta is saying no mind. There's no mindfulness. Vedanta says no mind. No mind, no world. That's all. Are you able to follow? So understand it from the angle of the long tradition of the Guru Sishya Parampara. In the long tradition of Guru Sishya Parampara, meditation is not advocated. Psychologically, we understand how it is not helpful. It is not a purpose for, it is not for healing and other things, nor is it a spiritual experience that you get some, you get some experience out of it. No, sir, but some energy we get with which I can sustain the whole day. I always feel better to plug that, better to take that energy away from people, because with this energy, what do people do? Shankar, are you able to understand? You get motivated, you get energized. With that energy motivation, what would you do? Go back into the world again. Go back and fall for the same world again and again. Now, to go back and fall for the same world again and again and again, you need not get energized and all. That's the most harmful thing to do. If I'm really affectionate over you, what would I do? I would prevent you from going back into the world. If I can't prevent you from going back into the world, at least I will not energize you to go and fall for it more. No. I get more energy and do what? Fall for the world more, indulge more, indisciplined. I go back to that indisciplined way of life again and again and again. For what? And meditation is not a therapy that gives me all that so that I can go back and fall for that again. It's a very highly advanced spiritual discipline. The last thing that a human being does, the last thing that the jiva does, the last karma of the jiva is dhyanam, meditation. After meditation, the jiva melts. the non-existent snake is understood as non-existent. The experiencer himself is dissolved. So when we are talking about meditation, meditation is to dissolve the experiencer, not to get a divine experience. Is it okay? With this, we conclude for today. Next week, we start with chapter 14, meditation. Hari Om.